We just earlier, I just together with you, we analyzed 5 aggregates. According to the Buddhist teaching, that is an analysis of human life, in fact. And that analysis, as you can see, it's real. It's really discussing human, recognition process, the process of recognition, in fact. After that, we coming back to the question is that we said earlier, the Buddhist philosophy is saying that the 5 aggregates of clinging are suffering. In other words, this is the Buddhist idea saying that why we are suffering because we cling to the 5 aggregates. In other words, according to the Buddhist idea is that not because we have 5 aggregates we suffer, it's because we cling to. So clinging here refers to psychological aspects in our life. Psychological aspect means that we attaching so much to ourselves, and that misconception, makes the problem. How this misconception? It's basically this means the idea of I comes into being and play a very important role. Therefore, it's here when we say this, in brief, 5 aggregates of a subject to clinging or suffering, you will naturally ask, who cling to? Because Buddhist idea is that there is no such kind of permanent entity called a soul, then who cling to? Therefore, these are the questions I just listed here. Many of my students also ask this, who grasps the 5 aggregates? Either grasp or who cling to the 5 aggregates? As the Buddhism says, there's no soul. Who? That is the question. And then second is how and why the process of clinging leading to suffering, if no soul? These are the 2 very important questions, and we need to answer these questions. And in order to answer these questions, in order to answer these questions, we need to understand how these 5 aggregates working together. These 5 aggregates, according to the Buddhist idea, is that they are working together, they do not separate. Therefore, they are interdependent, one depends on the other, and all are related together. Since these are all related together, working depends on condition and causes. Therefore, according to the Buddhist idea, there is no such kind of permanent, everlasting entity. We don't find a permanent, everlasting entity, whatever they are. Whether you call a soul, a God, or Indian Atma, whatever they are. All this, we don't find a permanent entity. We don't find a permanent entity, and anything arises and disappears because of the condition changes, naturally, it will bring us to a kind of a problem. This problem we call suffering. Because of the changing, because all these entities, all these aggregates are changing, ever changing. So changing itself is a problem. The next question is, who grasps or cleaning these 5 aggregates? So Buddhism is saying that the cleaning here refers to the idea of I, in fact. We said earlier, I put here, there are 3 ways according to Buddhism. We cling to the 5 aggregates or grasping, attached to it. And as we said earlier, although Buddhism rejects the idea of a permanent, everlasting soul or I, but Buddhism recognizes that there is a concept of I. And this concept of the I is we just build up, as we said earlier. And this concept of the I is gradually, when we are born into this world, gradually built up. Therefore, whenever our 5 senses coming into contact with outside objects, When feeling arises, then there is an I arises. So this I arises, once when it arises, it always, grasping the five aggregates in this way. This is mine. That is the first kind of grasping. And this first grasping, according to the Buddhist idea, that is due to craving. Craving. So this craving is an emotional thing. So that means when feeling arises, immediately the I comes up, and then something good, then we want to possess. We want to have it. We want to honor it. So that is the idea of craving. Therefore, craving here in Buddhism, it's including all type of cravings. Some are small, least stronger. Some more, others are very strong. So Buddhism using the idea of craving here means very strong ones, but including also the minor ones as well. Therefore, the cleaning here plays a very important role. Because of this cleaning, therefore, we attaching to the five aggregates according to Buddhism, and there then we take pleasures. That is the first way. The second way here is this I am looking at this physical body endowed with consciousness, and we just say, this I am. That is due to concept. You proud about this. That is another, also a psychological thing, remember. This psychological thing come into being, and in Buddhism called manas, and here means an idea of I become very strong. That's why the Yogacara Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhist school, one of them, and taking this part into seventh consciousness. So the seventh consciousness means that you always, taking the idea of I very strongly as a kind of feeling. So here, it's because of manas. Manas, because the idea of I is also always there, comes up. And the third one here is always saying that this is myself. This is due to our mistaken view or delusion, thinking that there is something permanent, everlasting within us. So that idea, to Buddhism is total delusion. That's why Buddhism rejects this idea, although other religions say that there is something permanent, everlasting within us, but Buddhism thinking that is due to misconception. That's why it's called wrong view, wrong idea. That's why Buddhism wants us to learn more and gradually rising up the right view or right understanding. So you understand, in fact, in our life, everything is changing. Nothing is permanent. Since nothing is permanent, so we can't have something, which is, going on forever, which is everlasting. That's why this is called the wrong view, wrongly have. So these are the three ways we appreciate and we cling to the five aggregates. All this we can say is a mental perception. It's a psychological idea. In other words, we have a delusion, psychological misconception about, the very idea of a self, very idea of a human being. That's why here comes into the problems, Buddhism saying that. That's why here we always say this is mine, this I am, myself, all these kind of idea. And because of this idea, then our thought comes into being and reinterpret a lot of things. So here we say, usually the scholars usually translate as a mental proliferation. Mental proliferation means that a lot of wrong ideas comes up. It's related to earlier, we discussed it's called perverted views, biased views there. Because at this stage, you bringing up all earlier memories, earlier learnings, knowledges, everything into play, and with the object in front of you, so you associate this object with all your past learning, and you reinterpret. It is in this way Buddhism says, because of this wrong view, it brings all the problems. That's why Buddhism says, life itself is characterized by suffering. In other words, life itself, is characterized by all kinds of problems. So we have all this. Naturally, we have all these problems. That's why Buddhism saying that life itself is full of problems. But of course, Buddhism also accepts that in our life, we have a lot of good things, happiness. But Buddhism, as we said earlier, wanted to solve our problem. That's why focusing only on the problematic aspects of the life rather than happy aspects. And this, in order to understand this, we need to understand the process of recognition. This process, Buddhism discusses in one of the discourses called honey bowl discourses. Have you learned this? Honey bowl discourses. It says that there are 7 stages in our recognition of outside objects. First is, it's using I as an example, for example. The I consciousness, comes up gradually because the I coming into a visible sense, you have seen something. Then I consciousness arises. When the I consciousness arises with the outside object and the organ of I, these 3 coming together, then sensory contact. So this sensory contact comes into being, then the third is feeling. Feeling comes up. When feeling comes up, then the immediate concept of I, this I arises. So I arises at the 3rd stage in our recognition, then the process. And I arises, this I then started to interpret. So here is perception, examining, these are the 2 stages. That's why, as we said earlier, when something moving past, then you notice there's a moving. That's called bare consciousness. When you recognize this as a cat, it's already coming into perception. In this perception, you already bring in your past memories, all kind of knowledges related to the cat, all come together with that bad experience you have. This bad experience also comes into being played. So you examine things. From there, examine things, then next they called conceptual proliferation. So that means here, we of course use the cat. Sometimes I use another example is when you feel, for example, here, oh, why here I have a pain? Every day here comes up a kind of pain. Then that is also depends on your feeling. And then you started to perceive exam. When you examine this, you will think what? Here is what? Here is my kidney. Or kidney might be called problems. And if I get kidney problems, that means a serious problem. And this serious problem can lead my death. I might die also. So all these thoughts are coming. Oh, what is called thoughts? These thoughts is called proliferation. A lot of thoughts are associated with this. In fact, whether you are dying or not, you don't know. Nobody knows, in fact. All these are, perverted views based purely on your own interpretations. And because of this, then you will also psychologically suffer. Why? Because that idea, oh, I'm going to die and I'm going to serious problem. This is a kidney problem. That idea, you might suffer a few days. In the last, of course, you are going to visit doctor. The doctor check up. In fact, the kidney is no problem. Then all the sense, released. But that suffering, it's real. When you have this, perverted views, it really brings a kind of suffering. That's why, today's doctors, psychologists all recognize that, our mind plays a very important role when we have a physical pain. When you concentrated your mind on the physical pain itself, then the physical pain will grow stronger and stronger. But if you divert your mind, thinking something else, in fact, that physical pain can be durable. You can bear up with the pain. That's why this mental proliferation, according to the Buddhist idea, in fact, it's happening every day, happening in our life, and we getting many different kind of things according to our experience. That's why here comes up the Buddhist idea called the world of experience. Because according to the Buddhist idea, for example, in this room, each one of us, we build up our own world of experience. For example, this is the same room. If I ask all of you to write 500 words small essay to describe your feeling or your idea about this room, there is no two of you will have exactly the same description. Why? Because each one of you, your perception of this room is different from the others. Why different? And this perception you have here, it's all related to your past experience. The past experience started to play. That's why all of us, in fact, we living in such kind of world of experience. We thought that this world of experience is real, related to outside world reality, but in fact, it's not true. Because this world of experience is we gradually build up, we interpret. That's why the same kind of statue, for example, some of them might think it very beautiful, very nice, while the others might not so, think differently. It's because of each one of us, we have different experience. It is here, then comes up this proliferation. And this, in fact, later on, overwhelming and impacts our decisions. That is most important. Because when it impacts our decisions, then bad feeling, of course, you will make bad decisions. Good feeling, good decisions. All this comes up. That's why Buddhism, it's important here is that let us to understand this. Understand this so that we can return to the original. That's why Buddhism teaching us is that we should see our life as it is, not using this perverted view. This perverted view is something problematic. That's why understanding is very important, and through the understanding, we will understand, why here our emotions related to feelings is so much, played a very important role in our life. So these five aggregates, here, why it clear to? It's because, according to the Buddhist idea, it's a self-edification as an object. And that means we identify this as ourself, and then we think we always wanted something permanent, something, longer. But in fact, this life is not like that. This life itself is always changing, and this changing state always brings problems. That is a Buddhist idea. And second is we need to understand there's no such kind of control. There is no such kind of soul or idea to control. We are totally lacking such kind of. Because of this, we are just, a process. In other words, Buddhist analysis of the human life is that life is only a process. And this process, in fact, is a self-edification. That's why the Buddhist text here, or I quoted a little bit later, I think. Buddhism says the human life is a conditioned nature. In other words, human life conditioned by many kind of things. Material things, of course, is the basis. And human relationship is another important thing. And most important thing is based on our perception of the world, perception about ourselves, perception about whole world. That's why the human life is conditioned by all these kind of things. And when we recognize this, then we will think our life differently. Therefore, it is here we recognize this as two things. Aggregates and cleaning are two different things. Aggregates refers to our human life, and we have these 5 groups, and we have these 5 groups not because we have the 5 groups we suffer, but because we cling to it. Cling to it. Cling here means that we have a wrong perception about ourselves. That's why we, suffer. When a person totally understands these kind of things, or enlightened beings, although they also suffer, but they suffer only physical pain, but not mental pain, because that person understands this kind of process. That is a Buddhist idea. That's why here, Buddhism says the whole of this process of grasping, there's only a process. This process, in fact, is problematic. In fact, this process is, Buddhism called suffering. That's why the text is saying that the Buddha said, monks, the I is impermanent. What is impermanent is suffering. Because the impermanent is always changing, and when it's changed, it's brought to suffering. And what is suffering is non-self. In fact, there's no permanent entity, in other words. What is non-self should be seen as it really is, with a correct wisdom, such, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. If we can have these kind of 3 views, that means we have a correct understanding. But of course, here comes the sense is very difficult. This is a more philosophical sense and very difficult to understand. Basically means that we change a way to look at ourselves, change our perceptions. In other words, all the physical things or any kind of events in our life, we cannot change the event of our life. For example, we are gradually grow old. We cannot change it. But we can always change our perception to this event. The perception to this event is very important. If we have a wrong perception to this event, then we will mentally suffer. If we have a right perception to this event, then we won't, mentally cling to it, then we won't suffer. That's why what Buddhism wanted us is to change our perception of the events. That is the Buddhist wanted our to. That's why it comes here. Buddhist ideas, life is a continuous flux. It's always changing. So that is in the Buddhist text saying that it is just like the mountain river, flowing far and swift, taking everything along with it. So Brahmana, that is a Brahmin, the Buddha talking to, is human life like a mountain river. In other words, whole life is continuing changing. Whether we like it or not, we cannot control it. None of us can control it. That's why we are gradually grow older and older. Finally, we die. So this is a process. So this process, Buddhism recognizes it, saying that this process, Buddhism also named as the world. So this world, in other words, human life, is a continuing, changing process, and that's why it's impermanent. Because changing, it's impermanent. That is the Buddhist analysis of the human life. Come here, I just wanted to clear up some misunderstanding about this, about the suffering. Many people thinking that Buddhism is pessimistic because always talking about suffering. We have suffered quite enough. Why you talk about it? When we look at the Oxford Dictionary, the dictionary gave this definition saying that the doctrine or belief that the actual world is the worst of all possible worlds, or that everything naturally tends to worst. So that is a pessimistic view. With the Buddhism is that we will look at this. So this can be divided into 2 questions. One is the doctrine or belief that actual world is the worst of all possible worlds. Second is a doctrine of belief that everything naturally turns to worst. So these are the two. So we will examine these two. The first one, now, pessimistic view means that looking into the world, everything turns to the worst. But Buddhism is not like that. Why? Buddhism is saying that, the human world is the best place for gods, good friends. It is the best benefit. Renouncing the world is the best action. In other words, we human beings wanted to go to heaven, thinking heaven is the best place and can enjoy. In fact, the heavenly beings, the gods, when they are going to die, they want to be reborn into the human world. In other words, human world is not a bad place. It is a human world. We experience the bad experience, we experience the suffering, we experience happiness. Because we experience both kinds of things, that's why we have an urgency. We want to attain happiness. We don't want to suffer. So the heavenly world, they are all full of happiness, no suffering. That's why they are lazy. They don't want to work for life. But animals, on the other hand, they are just suffering, no happiness. That's why the human world is the best according to Buddhism. Because of this, we work hard, we want to improve life. That is the most important one. That's why Buddhism did not say that human world is the best. Therefore, this is not like. So I just quoted here. So these are the texts. I'm not going to read it. In other words, the human world is not the worst place, but a better place. We live here. We strive for a better life. Second is the doctrine saying that everything naturally turns to the worst. This is another thing. This, when we look at the Buddhism also does not have this kind of idea. Looking things, everything, looking at the worst aspect, negative views. No. Why? As we said earlier, Buddhism recognizes that it's only human beings, we have the urgency to improve our life. As I said earlier, for a person who born as an animal, he or she does not have that urgency. Why? Because he does not experience human happiness. Since you do not recognize humanness, you don't know the goal. For the heavenly being, they have only suffering. Only happiness, no suffering. That's why they also do not have the urgency. That's why we human beings, we have that urgency. That's why we will make, we like all of us, all of you, you come here, you want to study. From study, you want to improve your life. That is urgency. That is important. Because of this urgency, you learn many things, improve life. It's only happen in the human world, in other words. That's why human beings becomes the most important thing. Although Buddhism says animals, human beings, all are equal. Although equal, but animals do not have the sense of urgency. That's why to be born as an animal, not good. To be born as a human being, it's a fortunate rebirth according to Buddhism. Fortunate rebirth, it's not because we are superior to animals like other religions, for example. We human beings are higher, animals are low, therefore we can kill the animal and eat. But Buddhism does not say that. Human beings are equal. But we are fortunate in the way that we have the capacity to develop our spiritual life. That's why Buddhism emphasizes that we can learn. Buddhism as a teaching presented here, through learning Buddhism, gradually we can improve our life. So tomorrow, I'm going to discuss the very, practical guidelines for Buddhism and how to achieve a happy life. That guideline itself, in fact, is that it does not require you to have faith in Buddhism even. In other words, if somebody believes some other religions, you still can learn Buddhism and get benefit from Buddhism. So that is very different from other religions. Therefore, next is the negative view. Buddhism does not have this negative view about the present life. Although Buddhism emphasizes on suffering, Buddhism saying that this suffering is within us. The causes found within us, they are psychological causes. Therefore, we can solve these problems. Therefore, this is called Four Noble Truths we discussed already. So the Four Noble Truths saying that there is an end of the suffering. So that end of the suffering called nirvana, and we interpret as happiness. Therefore, Buddhism is not a pessimistic religion, not pessimistic view either. That's why Buddhism is a realistic view, and saying that we have a good, a bad, we have happiness and suffering. It's realistic. That's why in the Buddhist text, usually compare Buddha as a physician. The physician is only looking into our illness with the aim to help us to cure the illness. The Buddha also, he wanted just, looking into human suffering and wanted to, help us to solve the problems. This I have quoted already. The next saying, the same thing the Buddha said, just as the great ocean has but one test, the test of soul. Even so, this doctrine and discipline has one test, the test of the deliverance. In other words, the only aim for Buddhism, Buddhist teaching, is deliverance from suffering, end of suffering. So that is the goal of Buddhist teaching. That's why at the beginning I say that suffering is the central, issue or problem Buddhism wanted to focus. And next I will discuss is, although Buddhism emphasizes on suffering in human life, Buddhism at the same time also admits many different kinds of happiness as well. Happiness of family life, we all live. Happiness of a life of recluse, we know that. Happiness of the sense pleasure, happiness of the renunciation, all different kinds of happiness. If we are truly happy without a problem, in fact, no need any religion. But in fact, our life, we have a lot of problems. That's why we need religion. So Buddhism recognizes that we have happiness, we have problem. But when we gradually grow older and older, we know that in fact in the world a lot of sufferings. That's why we need religion. We need religion to solve these problems. Different religions offer different ways. Buddhism offered way is more realistic and based on the ethical teachings. That's why we say Buddhism is not a pessimistic religion. So next I want to discuss with you together is what Buddhism called the very causes of suffering. The very causes of suffering, Buddhism always says it's a self-centered desire. We call it tanha. That is a Pali word. In other words, everything we wanted to have is, for example, you have a mobile phone. I want this mobile phone. I want to possess. I is there. I want this house, large house. I is there. I want this kind of things, that kind of things. All it's centered on yourself. So this self, centered on self, getting on all this problem. That's why it comes called sensual pleasures, desires, that most of us we do. The desire for being, that means living here. Some religions believe for non-being. That is because of the Indian situation. Some of religions thinking that this life is really, really problem, and they don't want to live a life. They want just to die. Some of the Indian religions do. Therefore, the Buddha used a kind of a simile saying that all are burning, he said. And what, monks? Is all that burning? The eye is burning, the form is burning, consciousness is burning, the eye contact is burning, whatever feeling arises with the eye contact is as condition, with a pleasant or painful, neither painful, all are burning. Burning with what? Burning with the fire of lust, burning with a fire of hatred, burning with a fire of illusion. So this is just literally saying. In other words, all these emotions, particularly here, lust, hatred, these are emotions, particular hatred. When it really comes up, it's really burning you. So this is the roots of the problem according to the Buddhist teachings. That's why this here means that our mind persists or obsessed by this kind of feeling like greed and hatred, then our mind out of control, going for all these kind of things. But we do not even recognize this. Recognize, in fact, our mind is going always on these kind of things. That's why Buddhism, analyze these things, want us to understand, in fact, all are because of this kind of self-desire, self-centered desire. So that is universal sins. Universal sins, in the way said, not only Chinese people like that, Japanese, Koreans, the English people, the American people, also the same thing. Why is the world, you look and say, today our world, so many fightings, when you watch television, watch news, every day is fighting, all because of this self-centered desire. American wanted to possess every opportunity, all the wealth they wanted to get. They want to buy Greenland today, morning watching the news. Then the Greenland, the Europeans, they don't want to give to him, then fighting. In other words, Buddhism analysis is that smaller to our human problems, as big as the international problems, all are down to this one problem. Self-centered cravings, self-centered desires, desire wanted to possess, coming to all kind of problems. That is the roots. Buddhism wanted us to tell that all that because of what? Because of the delusions, because of the wrong things. That's why here, craving, if we come up this and without a kind of good understanding, without the checking ourselves, then it fitted on what? Nourished by ignorance. Nourished by ignorance, we always look outside, thinking that the more things we possess, then we will be happy. In fact, that is true, not true. That's why Buddhism says that we need to recheck this, and we know that, in fact, happiness does not depend on material things. Definitely does not depend on all the outside things. If our happiness depends on other people, then if other people die and go away, then we don't have happiness. Therefore, Buddhism says we need to look inward ourselves, looking into our mind as the sources. Our mind as both the source for happiness as well as the suffering. It depends on how we train our mind. Therefore, from this we can say, entire Buddhist teaching is a pursuit of happiness, in fact. We put it in positive words. Buddhism always emphasizing on suffering and wanted to solve suffering. Therefore, we looking into a different way. It's a pursuit of happiness, in fact. Because it's basically wanted to root out all the personal problems, and finally you look for happiness. That's why Buddhism, the Buddha established this teaching called the Noble Eightfold Path. That path is a very practical, so practical it's become a kind of solution to the problems. That's why that path, the first one, is called right understanding. Only with the right understanding, then guide all our paths and practices, then we lead into our suffering, lead into our happiness. And this, when we coming back to looking into the dependent origination, in fact, the whole of Buddhist teaching tracing this, the ignorance is the very roots of all our problems. But The basic thing here is coming here is self-centered desire. Here is everyday, we are facing a kind of a situation. But this situation we can see is that it's because of the six faculties, the second faculty coming into contact, and then there come have self-centered desire. This self-centered desire then come to cleaning. So the self-centered desire cleaning, in fact, these two are very close. The nature is the same. The difference is that the desire is just not so, if we compare to cleaning, is not so strong. Desire is something, for example, you wanted a large house or some kind of iPhone, anything you want. And when this kind of desire become an internal, very strong, emotion, then it become a cleaning. So cleaning means a very, very strong desire. So all these are guided by ignorance. Ignorance. No. So Buddhist idea is that we need to understand this kind of interrelationship, and Buddhism saying that all the material things we can possess, we can use, but once when you attach to it, that is a problem. Therefore, Buddhism does not saying that rich people are bad, rich people because they have a lot of possessions. Buddhism does not say that. Buddhism says that once when you attach these kind of things too much as a possession, clinging to it as a psychologically, that is a problem. That's why the Piyadasa here is one of the Sri Lanka's leading Buddhist monk, scholar, and he died long ago already. He said, this is a mental state that cling to or grasp the object even as a piece of raw meat that sticks to the saucepan. Because of this clinging, which is described as a craving in a high degree, man becomes a slave to passion and falls into the net of himself, has made of his passion for pleasure, like the caterpillar that spins itself a tangle in which it lives. So explain this two kind of cravings. These cravings, as we said earlier, it's fed by ignorance. Ignorance, here I just discussed this with Bhikkhu Bodhi. Ignorance does not mean that we lack of knowledge, lack of itemized knowledge. A lot of things maybe mechanically, how this, for example, how the computer works, how the table, all these kind of things. But this knowledge does not help us much. This knowledge can make you a specialist in computer or anything else. But Buddhism is saying that ignorance is a fundamental darkness in our mind. In other words, our mind cannot think properly and clearly about human life, about ourselves. Therefore, this darkness, in fact, at the beginning, we even do not know about this. Even do not know, in fact, this darkness or this ignorance, in fact, lead our life. It's through learning we gradually know this. Therefore, this ignorance at the beginning work passively, guided us. And only when we take, learning through these kind of things, gradually understand, human life, then this ignorance gradually dies out. That's why in the Buddhist interpretation is that ignorance and wisdom, they are two opposite. Just like in this room, when this light comes up, it's wisdom. When we switch off the electronics, then all fall into darkness. That is ignorance. That's why these two things, just two opposite. When wisdom arises, ignorance naturally just disappeared. So Buddhism emphasizes that we need to learn as much as possible. It's through learning we gradually understand our life better, understand the world we are living in better, so we can have a better position to deal with all these kind of things. That's why it's because of this ignorance leading us to craving and particularly hatred. Hatred particularly is one of the very destructive emotions in our life. Many things, in fact, it's because of the hatred. In fact, we break up the relationship, break up the families, many kind of things. It's because we do not understand it, and then we lost control because of this, ignorance. That's why Buddhism wanted us to tackle with ignorance, and in order to tackle that, learn and understand more and more about these kind of things. So craving, according to Buddhism, as we said earlier, craving sensual pleasures, craving for existence, for non-existence, particularly craving for the sensual pleasures. That is, we as ordinary people, most of us, we do. Most of us, we craving for, sensual pleasures, a lot of them. So this is, Buddhism analyzes this into, in fact, two categories. The first category is here, the word of the 5 strands of the sense desires. So according to Buddhism, this, always feed us and we live on. So here the Buddha said, Brahmins, these 5 strands of sense desires are called the word in the discipline of the Aryas. So discipline of the Aryas here refers to the Buddha's teaching. In other words, in the Buddha's teaching, there's 5 strands of the sense desire. It's called the word. What are 5? Shape, cognized by the eye, longed for, luring, pleasurable, lovely, born up with passion and desire. Sound, cognized by the ear, smell, by the nose, tasted by the tongue, contact by the touch, longed for, luring, pleasurable, lovely, bound up with passion and desire. So this is the word of the desire. In other words, it's our 5 senses: the eyes, ears, nose, the tongue, and the body. So these 5 senses, we always constantly, we need to feed up. So this is what Buddhism calls the word. In other words, what Buddhism wanted to discuss the word is our 5 senses endowed with the consciousness, word of experience. Although Buddhism also discusses the outside, the physical world, the universe, but that is not so important because our life is more important. That's why these 5 strands of sense desire in Buddhism, saying that it's the most important part we need to understand, and we need to get it controlled, under our control. That's why Buddhism spends so much of the teachings. Perhaps a lot of you studied the Theravada text. Many of the texts discussing this, because this is the roots of the problems. That's why there is one text called penetrative understanding here. Penetrative understanding. What penetrative understanding? Penetrative understanding of ourselves, about the 5 strands of sense desires. That's why here it says, monks, the strands of the sense desires are the 5. Form cognized by the eye, luring, and repeated again. So these, of course, later on Buddhism just summarized here. These are the 5 things we are actually. Wealth, sex, fame, food, and sleep. These are the 5 we just desired for. So Buddhism is saying that this desire, in fact, is a psychological thing. That's why the text is here saying that, continues the same text, in fact, saying that, in passionate purpose lays man's sense desire. The world's gay glitters are not sense desires. In passionate purpose lays man's sense desire. The world's gay glitters as they abide. But the wise man holds desire, therefore, in check. So this is an older translation. And this is another translation. In other words, desire, not because outside there are so many beautiful things, nice things, iPhones. Desire, it's because of our mind, our psychological thinking. Therefore, desire is a psychological thing. Although there might be outside beautiful things, nice things, a lot of them, if we understand this, learn and understand our mind, then we can control this desire. Wise man here said, hold desire therefore in check. That means he understands this desire. This desire is within our mind, within our control. It's a psychological thing. That's why here comes back to the mind. That's why here saying that the world is led around by the mind. Mind abstract here and there. This word again means word of human experience. Our world all led by our mind. Since mind plays so important role, therefore, entire Buddhist teaching we can say is an understanding of the mind. Since Buddhism related to the understanding of the mind, that's why Buddhism is so difficult to understand, very difficult. Why? Because our very mind is very difficult to understand. Neuroscience, psychology, all are studying of our mind. But still, for example, neuroscience, still in its very, very early age, at the beginning only, to understand our mind. It's so difficult. So the Buddha tried in so many different ways to explain this. We earlier already explained a little bit, but it's difficult to understand. The 3 ways of appreciation of the 5 aggregates, that's related to the mind, in fact. It is this. Its cultivation of particular attitude of the mind is vital for our happiness. It's just as we have said earlier, we can never change the event in our life. Old age days, we can never change it. But we can always change our perception to this event. That is Buddhism wanted to teach us. That's why the Buddhist idea is that renunciation is not completely withdrawn from the physical world, but the cultivation of particular attitude of the mind within us. In other words, those who, for example, Buddhist monks and nuns, they still live in heart of, Singapore, bubbling city, so busy. As long as they cultivate their mind, cultivate a particular attitude to the world, they will not be affected by the worldly sense. So the entire Buddhism is teaching us to cultivate this particular attitude of the mind to look at these events in our life. So many events. It is in this way, gradually Buddhism wanted to, through this teaching, to change our outlook. Change our outlook about the whole of human life. Because this is the most important. That's why the entire Buddhism, we can say, is a mental training. Training of our mind. Training of our mind. That's why it's looking into here. We find the internal peace. The internal peace is gradually train our mind so that our mind can think reasonably, sensibly, rationally. As we said earlier, neuroscience already taught us our mind is chaotic, in fact. Why chaotic? It's full of ignorance. And we need to train our mind so that the mind can work, rationally, logically, with thinking sense, always thinking like Buddhist teaching. There is an issue, immediately we will find the causes to the problem and try to find a solution to the problem. So that is a very logical, very rational way of thinking. So that is Buddhism wanted to train our mind so that our mind can, manage our life under our control. That's why Buddhism saying that the mind is one thing that has to be under control, under our control. So the mind here, of course, in the Chinese Mahayana Buddhism, in the Chan school, the mind is usually taken as a bull. Training of the bull, you taming the bull from a black bull, tame as a white bull. In the Tibetan tradition, use an elephant, a black elephant gradually trained to a white elephant. All are symbol of the mind. So all coming back to mind, in fact. So other two existence, of course, we want the craving for existence is that is a basic drive for all us human beings. We want to exist. We don't want to die. The second here, I don't want to emphasize too much, is some of the Indian religions. For example, Jainism is one of them. There are also some other Indian religions. They have this, in Buddhist context, called these are wrong views. Wrong views in the way that they think that this life is full of suffering, too much suffering, no way out, therefore they just wanted to die. They don't want to live this life. That's why Buddhism calls this another kind of also desire. And this desire is desire to die. It's not good, in fact. That's why Buddhism criticized this as well. So with this, I just come into today's conclusion of today's lectures. We still have some time. We just say this Four Noble Truths in Buddhism is a philosophy about human life. It's entirely focusing on analysis of the human life and identify saying that there are problems in our human life, and then we can find the solutions to these problems. That's why it focuses on human suffering. Focusing on human suffering, the aim is entirely to solve human problems. Therefore, in the Buddhist text, it did not say, looking outside God or something to find the solution. But the solution is within us, within ourselves. When we accept this fact, we have problem, then you will work on it and then find the solution. And this solution gradually Buddhism identified to where? It's identified to the self-centered craving. This self-centered craving is a mental thing. It's a mind. Basically, Buddhism coming back to the very roots of the human problem, saying that everything coming back to our mind. If our mind, if we do not have a right understanding about our life, if we do not have a right view about life, then we will suffer. If we have a right view, we cultivate a right view, have a right understanding, then we will live a better life. That is a Buddhist idea. So that's why it's all coming back to the mind. So we still have 20 minutes. We can discuss if you have any question or things. Yeah.
Professor, thank you very much for the good lecture again.
Yeah.
Yes. Just now talk about nothing is impermanent, and we talk about consciousness will be actually transferred to another
next life.
Yeah, next life.
Yeah.
So can we then say consciousness itself is impermanent?
Yeah. According to the Buddhist teaching, consciousness is also impermanent. It's always changing. Therefore, Buddhism says consciousness arises depending on conditions. For example, eye consciousness, depending on the eye and outside kind of shaped sizes. And when the eye comes into contact with the shaped sizes, then consciousness arises. Therefore, consciousness is not permanent. Maybe your question is that, how about this life to next life? How the consciousness goes on from this life to next life? Buddhism says is that the last consciousness of the dying person serves as a condition for the first consciousness of next life to arise. That's why this consciousness always, coming up and also disappear, coming up and also disappear. That's why Buddhism, just like the Western idea, consciousness is a stream of consciousness. It's always arising and disappear, arising and disappear, always like that. That's why consciousness is impermanent. It's not permanent. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Prof. So I just have one clarification. I think earlier when you talked about karma, you said in the Pali Canon and in the Theravadan perspective, we always say karma is cetana, karma is volition.
That's right. Yeah.
And you mentioned, if I didn't hear wrongly, that in the Agamas or in the Mahayana text, we don't really see that karma is cetana, but do we also see that intention is a driver for karma in the Agamas?
Yeah. What I say is in the Agamas, we don't find the exact sentence like the Theravada, saying that volition is karma. We don't find this sentence. But in the Agamas also say volition is in fact karma. But that is explained in the Abhidharmas. Yeah, it's the same as the Theravada tradition. Exactly the same. Yeah.
So it appears in the Abhidharma, but not in the Agamas.
Yeah, the Agamas we don't find the sentence. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Hi, Professor. Just to check, just now you mentioned about karma. And then learning the way of life actually can help you to change subsequently the karma later on.
Yeah, According to the Buddhist teaching is that we can always change our karma. Although we might have, due to ignorance, we have done some bad karmas, but Buddhism saying that, when we learn the Buddhism and understand better, we consciously doing something good and to cultivate good karmas, and particularly four immeasurable mind, we call it the loving kindness, compassion, and joyful, and equanimity. These are the four. If we cultivate these four ideas of mind, then we will accumulate a lot of good karma. And this good karma can cover and overturn the bad karmas. That's why Buddhism says we can achieve enlightenment because we can change our karma. That is one of the most important teaching. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I also ask one more?
Yeah.
You talk about cravings, right? So, like we would have like cravings, like belongings to parents, siblings, children.
Yeah.
Are they classified as cravings as well?
Yeah. Cravings, there are a few things. There are good cravings and bad cravings, in fact. Buddhism always talk about the bad cravings, craving for the bad things. There are also good aspects. For example, you come here to learning, it's also a form of a craving. And attain enlightenment, for example, that is also a form of a craving also. But these are the good cravings. Therefore, Buddhism do not use a craving in these good aspects. But when Buddhism uses the word craving, always in the sense of a negative idea, always. Therefore, for example, you say you have a human relationship, parents, siblings, and you have that. That is the good aspects. Therefore, they are not named as cravings. Therefore, this craving usually is negative in the Buddhist sense. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor. My question may not be related to the lecture today, but
no
it's
problem.
a little bit related.
Yeah, no problem.
Many of the Buddhism, especially we are from Myanmar.
You're from Myanmar.
And we practice Theravada Buddhism.
Yeah.
We have become Buddhism because of our parents are Buddhists.
Tradition.
Yeah, traditional Buddhism. So, but Buddhism in Myanmar especially is teaching to be good behavior or good karma.
Yeah.
So many of the Buddhism nowadays, especially young people, Buddhism teaching about fears. And also in Myanmar, many people are living in fears that we do not know where we are going when we die. So we got to practice good karma to go good place in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
So just now Professor mentioned about cautiousness. At the end of your departure will be reflected to your next life. So my question here is, but in Christianity, they are teaching about there is a God. When you die, you go to
Heaven, yeah.
So many Christianity, when they die, they don't have any worry. So they may even want to go into mission to self-departed, something like that. So how could we describe to the young generation of people how to live
Better
peaceful, or also myself, how to die peacefully?
Very good question.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, very good question. That is central to Buddhist teachings. Buddhism is that, although the Buddhist explanation says that the last consciousness of the dying person is very important, vital. If the last consciousness is good, then the next life's consciousness will be good. If the last consciousness is bad, confused, the next life is bad. How to ensure the last consciousness is good? Buddhism saying that if in your life doing good things, then the memory of the good things will come up, surface. If in the life doing things, a lot of bad things, the memory of the bad things will come up. Because the dying person is very weak, therefore he cannot control his mind. Therefore, the stronger memory usually comes up first. So the Buddhist idea is that in order for us, has a last consciousness is good, to be good and to have a next life to be reborn as a better life, that means whole life we shall do good things. If we have done all the good things in our life, good karmas, when death, when we come in for the death, we don't worry. Why? Because we have done all the things. Even in the last moment, all our good ideas will come up. That's why when we die, we are surely to be reborn into a better place. That's why, as you said, Buddhism teaches the young people to do good things. If they have to do good things in their whole life, last moment, no need to worry about it. Why? Since you have accumulated good things, then in the last minute, also good idea comes up. When you die with a good idea, then of course to be reborn into a good place. That is a Buddhist explanation. That's why morality is a very important thing in Buddhism. Buddhism looks at morality as the foundation of Buddhist happiness. Without morality, Buddhism says, no happiness. Only a belief in a God, not enough, Buddhism says. Morality means accumulated good actions. Whether you like or not, they will give its consequences. That's why the masters in Myanmar teaching young people to do good things. That means they are ensuring a good life, next life. That is good teaching.
Thank you so much. But there is another one related question.
Traditionally
in Myanmar, majority Buddhist monks and also nuns start with Dana, Sila, Bhavana. So where also my personal belief is that it's in a way a little bit misleading, starting with Dana. Dana will lead to wealthy, right? So without Dana, you are a problem, something like that. So what I see in our country is even though people are suffering and people are having a lot of poverties, they try to do a Dana, believing that they could be well in future, something like that. So with this, many young generation, without Dana, they don't believe Dana, or they say that Buddhism asking always about Dana, which I see some of my kids are also talking about that. But when we get into Sila, Samadhi, Pinya, then that's a different thing. So could you please differentiate between dana, sila, bhavana, and sila, tamari, pinya?
Yeah, very good question. That means you dive into Buddhism for a long time, think about this. In fact, according to the Buddhist teaching, dana is very important. Dana is a part of this doing marriage, doing meritorious good deeds, in fact. Because most important thing is not about dana itself, not about you are making offering something, little or more something itself. More importantly is the mind. But when you gradually cultivate the idea of dana, cultivating our idea of doing good deeds, even if you do a small thing, your mind full of happiness. Because your mind enjoy doing these good things. And this mentality prepares the way for you to go on for, what you said is sila and samadhi and panya. Without this, you can't go on for samadhi and panya. That's why dana is a very important basic thing. Why? Because we are all ordinary peoples. Since we are ordinary peoples, we need to have a gradual path leading to. If we once, when your kids so young, you immediately teach, oh, that is a fundamental truth, that is nirvana, they won't understand. They don't understand. But if you teach them, oh, you make an offering to the temples, and that is good, they understand. That's why the Buddhist teaching called gradual teaching, gradually leading people to the highest. But in order to reach that, you need to start from the very beginning, the basic things. That's why you should still continue to teach your kids, start with the dana. Although, some people, of course, really poor in Myanmar, but you just give a little. Most important is the mind, emphasizing on the mind. Because when you do that act, you are thinking, I'm doing good things. Since I'm doing good things, I enjoy the good things. Good things are peaceful. Good things are good for the mind. That itself, prepares your mind for the highest. It's good. Yeah. 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 There. Yeah.
Is there good craving and bad craving?
Yeah. Buddhism says that there are good cravings, but do not use the term craving. Do not use. There's a different kind of words. But there are also, when you're looking into the nature, in fact, they are the same thing. Same thing. Just a different kind of things. We use another word, motivation. But still, for example, you come here to learn this. It's also some kind of you say it's a motivation. When you look into nature, it's also some kind of a cravings. But Buddhism using this word, when using craving, is purely for the negative aspects. That's why I say anything craving is bad, because purposely for the negative aspects. But that nature of the mind, there are also good aspects. Yeah. Yeah.
Professor, I have one question may not be related to today's subject.
Oh, no problem. Any questions?
It's about other religions talk about heaven. So is nirvana ultimately equivalent to heaven?
No.
Or for that matter, for Pure Land Buddhism, want to go to the Pure Land. Is that Pure Land also heaven?
No. Both Pure Land and also nirvana, they are all not heavens. Why? Because the Buddhist idea of nirvana is simply means end of, craving, hatred, delusion. When these three things rooted out, that is nirvana. It is in this sense, that means nirvana can be attained right here and now. For example, the Buddha, he attained nirvana at the age of 35. But he's still alive in this life. Therefore, nirvana is a state of a mind. That mind or that mentality without any kind of a craving, hatred, delusions. That's why in the text, usually gave a symbol is that when the fire gone out, when the fire completely died out, that is called nirvana. What kind of fire? Fire of craving, fire of hatred, fire of delusion. That's why the nirvana means a state of a mind, peaceful, joyful, happy mind. That's why it's different from heaven. That's why attaining nirvana does not need us to die. If you want to go to heaven, you must die. Otherwise, how can you go to heaven? Basic question. But we enjoy nirvana right here and now. No need to die. The Buddha at the age of 35 attained nirvana, and his disciples, so many of them called Arahant, they all attained nirvana, but they're still living right here in this life. That's why I said that Buddhist idea about happiness is that we can live happily right here, right now, without going to heavens. That is very different from other religions. Because to Buddhism, even if those who go to heaven there, to Buddhist explanation is that they still subject to death. They are going to die also like human beings. So when they die, they are looking for a good place to be reborn. They come to human world. That's why the Buddhist idea of heaven and hell all are impermanent, all are changing. So other religion only saying that the heaven is always there and hell is always there. Thinking that way, it's terrible. Why terrible? If somebody born into heaven, hell, that means no way to go out. So terrible. But Buddhist idea, even if you born into hell, that means one day you can go out because it is impermanent. When the bad karma exhausted, you can still to be reborn as human beings. It's always a hope. Even in the bad situation, there's a hope you can go out. That is the beauty of the Buddhist teachings. Not the heaven, not heaven. It's a mind. It's not the heaven. It's a mind. Still mentality. That's why the Chinese master saying that when we reborn to the Pure Land, we go nowhere, just here. That's in the Chinese Buddhist text saying that reborn into wisdom paradise or Pure Land, we do not go anywhere but here. That's purification of the mind. When the mind is pure, the land is pure. That is said in the Buddhist text. So Pure Land is not something outside. It's still within our mind. The mind.
Thank you, Professor, for sharing. Very, very enlightening. One question. You mentioned about it's always good to be reborn human, so that you actually get to experience the different level of happiness and unhappiness, rather than going to the heaven realm. So is there any text that actually tells one to practice so that you get reborn in the human life again and again to practice instead of going up or going down?
Tomorrow I will talk about that. Noble effort path. Not only as a human being, right here we can be happy. Noble effort path. Tomorrow.
Many young people are saying that they don't want to go heaven. They don't want to go nirvana because nothing exists. They want to continue to be a human as a happiness.
That's why if you other religions, if you ask them really, you think heaven is happy, do you want to go now? They surely refuse. Surely. But nirvana, of course, people just misunderstand. It's a state of mind. In that state of the mind, all cravings, hatred, delusion, all are gone. You really enjoy the happiness right here and right now. Therefore, nothing changed, and the mentality just changed. That's why Buddhism is saying that all the events in life, anything, we cannot change it. We just change our perception. That is the most important. That's why it's called the training of the mind. The mind, train our mind. Okay. Time's up.
I have one more question.
Okay.
Can we reclassify Buddhism as education, 教育,
Yeah, you can see.
宗教
You can see
is
whole life education. You can see. So this education is bringing up you gradually to achieve wisdom. Yeah, you can. Religion, of course, that is, usually people using that word to classify it. If you're looking into the definition of religion in the Western countries, Buddhism is not religion. Because for a religion, that means there must be a God. You believe the God. Buddhism does not have that kind of idea. Using religion just conveniently, we just using that term. Because otherwise, you don't have the term to describe Buddhism. It's just a convenience. Just like we have the names, all are for the convenience. For the registration, all kind of things, we use a name. But always are human beings. So religion, that term itself, is problematic. That's why Buddhism, if we say anything about Buddhism using modern technology, modern terminologies, Buddhism is a psychology. It's purely psychology. Why? Buddhism is fully focusing on analysis of the mind, nothing but the mind. It's a psychology. That is the most suitable word. Yeah. It's not a philosophy. It's not about a religion. Philosophy, only for the, solving your metaphysical questions. But it's psychology. Yeah.
It's more an educational psychology.
Yeah, psychology of education. Yeah.